Let's get started today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Good afternoon. And this is the last session of today's virtual events for Building Bridges. I hope you've enjoyed your time so far today. We're happy to have you here. My name is Jennifer Nail. I'm going to be your host for this session. And I'm the reentry coordinator for the Cincinnati region with the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections Office of Reentry. I'm also a member of the planning team for Building Bridges. So it's really been nice today to see all of our months of planning roll out and produce a really enjoyable and informative event. And I hope it's been the same for you. So like I said, this is a new service option for record sealing and expungement. So just a couple of housekeeping items. I'm going to ask you to keep your cameras mostly off. It just helps minimize distractions. And you've been muted as you joined. We are leaving the option to unmute yourself open, but I'm going to ask you to not unmute until after our presentation is over and we've moved into a more formal question and answer. If you accidentally unmute yourself during the presentation, I'm going to be mean and mute you back. Just so you know. I will be monitoring the chat for any issues as we move through today's presentation and material. So please feel free to make notes of any questions or to get them into the chat, and we're going to get as many questions answered as we can today. Our presenter is Hannah Miller, and Hannah is project manager at the Ohio State University Moritz College of Law, and she's a triple Buckeye, and I had to learn what that is. What that means is that both her undergraduate and graduate degrees come from OSU, and she is now an employee of the university. So triple Buckeye. She's joining us from Columbus, where she lives with her husband and son. And Hannah's been in public service for 5 years. She started with the Columbus City Council before moving over to the Moritz College of Law in 2021. Now, as we get moving here, everybody needs to understand that Hannah is not an attorney. There's no legal advice or discussion of individual cases forthcoming today. This is to learn about the only virtual sealing and expungement option that serves all Ohio residents. So again, this is about a program that connects people with legal help, not providing legal help in this session. So Hannah, I'm gonna turn it over to you. I am here if you need me, but the floor is yours, and I can't wait to hear what you have to share with us.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I understand everyone has been sitting in sessions all day today, and I know that that can be really taxing on the body. So luckily you're not on camera, so you can stand up if you want to and take a stretch, take a deep breath, and we're in the last stretch. So again, my name is Hannah Miller. I work at the Moritz College of Law in a center called the Drug Enforcement and Policy Center. And we have two projects that aim to provide record relief assistance to justice-involved members of the Ohio community. And this project really began out of an observation that brick and mortar clinics every so often wasn't meeting the need of a lot of people that either could not take time off work on Saturdays or could not find childcare to go and wait in line to those clinics. And so tried to think of a way to deliver services remotely so that people didn't have to choose between childcare, job, et cetera, and the services that they need. And just also tried to align this type of service with any other kind of service that you could call and get assistance without having to leave the comfort of your home or leaving your office. So you could just do something on your lunch break. So the Drug Enforcement Policy Center is a research center. So our bread and butter really is research, but we have these two projects. One of them is the Opportunity Port Project, and then the other is the Ohio Governor's Expedited Pardon Project, and that is focused on people who are not eligible for sealing and expungement, but there is a quicker path to receive a governor's pardon through that project. I'm not going to be talking about that project today, but I will. I do encourage you that if you have questions about it, you're more than welcome to reach out to me and I can send you information about that. So record relief is used to mean many different things, but what I mean by record relief, I'm talking about all the things in Ohio that removes collateral consequences from, like, it it helps alleviate the consequences that someone may be experiencing as a result of their criminal record. So in
Hey,
Ohio,
Hannah, I'm really sorry to jump in. Your slideshow is not moving forward for me. I don't know if that's the same for everybody, but it looks like slideshow still needs to start on my end.
oh, okay. How about now?
Perfect. You're on.
Okay, so sorry about that.
Go. You're good.
Okay.
You.
So, all right. So record relief in Ohio runs the gambit from sealing and expunging records to gaining a governor's pardon to certificates of relief, which kind of, if we had to put these in order, like certificates of relief are things that you get if you're really not eligible for sealing or expungement, but you really need relief from the impact that those records are having on you. Sealing and expungement is the next best thing. And then executive clemency is kind of like the gold standard in a way. CQE stands for Certificate of Qualification for Employment, and CQH stands for Certificate of Qualification for Housing, which is a new certificate of relief in the state of Ohio. Again, if you have questions about those things, you can contact me and I can give you more information. Opportunity Port only assists with the first thing, which is sealing or expunging records of conviction and dismissal. We do not assist with certificates of relief, and there's a separate project that helps with expedited pardons, but we do not help with traditional pardons, which is like the longer anyone can apply for a traditional pardon, but we do not Opportunity Port, but the center does not assist with traditional pardon applications. So Opportunity Port is a remote-based, mobile-friendly sealing and expungement program. And what do I mean by remote-based? Well, we don't have a brick and mortar place where people come for assistance. We do everything over the phone or over email. Others might call it a virtual clinic, remote-based virtual clinic. I like saying remote-based because virtual, sometimes you think that there needs to be a video component involved in services, but that's not what we mean. We'll call you on the phone, or we'll email you, or we'll text you. So we're just assisting you from afar. Mobile friendly just means that you can access the website from a mobile web browser. So if you open up Google Chrome on your phone, you're not going to have weird, disproportioned things on the website show up. It's specifically formatted so that someone could sign up and engage with us through their mobile phone. And yeah, okay. So we have two service models for Opportunity Port. One is Franklin County specific, and one is statewide, which is pretty much a service model for anyone who lives outside of Franklin County and has offenses anywhere in the state of Ohio. But the service model for Franklin County is specific to residents of Franklin County with offenses either in Franklin County or across the state. Both service models have like a basic journey for the applicant. You register by going to opportunityport.org. You click Get Started. You answer all the questions in the survey, and then you select a service provider. For statewide applicants, which is anyone who lives outside of Franklin County, they have one service provider, and that is us at the Drug Enforcement Policy Center at the Mortiz College of Law. If you live in Franklin County and you make under a certain amount for your household and your household size, basically you get two options: the Legal Aid of Southeast and Central Ohio or the Drug Enforcement Policy Center. And that just depends on your income, household size, because Legal Aid has income guidelines for services. The service provider will review a person's record and then have an appointment over the phone to discuss what they're eligible for, what they're not eligible for, and what the next steps are. And the next step is completing an application. And then the last step is filing that application with the court. And at that point, Opportunity Port and the service provider's job is done. So once an application is filed with the court, then the court process takes over, and the court, per revised code, has to schedule a hearing between 45 and 90 days of filing. And then there's a hearing in front of a judge. You have to go to that hearing to be considered for your application requesting sealing or expungement of your criminal records to be considered. And you apply at each court at which you have cases that are eligible to be sealed or expunged. So we've had people come through the program who have cases across 10 counties, and we've had to create 10 different applications. Statewide applicants, we call all of those applicants are pro se applicants. So we create the applications for them, but the applicant has to then file at those courts. Franklin County, this is the biggest difference. Franklin County service model, we assist Franklin County residents to and through filing. So we not only assist in determining eligibility and completing the applications, but we were given dollars by Columbus City Council to also file on behalf of those applicants. So we cover the filing fee for Franklin County Court of Common Pleas and Franklin County Municipal Court. And that's because there's no easy way to do a remote affidavit or poverty affidavit process where we could do both the application and the essentially the waiver to waive the filing fee remotely. An affidavit requires a notarized signature, and notarized signatures done virtually, it's a mess. So it's actually a lot cheaper in the interim to just pay the filing fee than have to mess with that. So I just explained the main difference between the Franklin County service model and the statewide service model. Basically, where do you live, where are your offenses, and whether or not we file on your behalf. So we launched Franklin County Services first in December of 2021. Things were going pretty well. And so we decided let's take this a step further and come up with a service model for statewide services. And so we launched that in January of this year. So far, since launching in January, this shows how many people have come to the site since we first launched, period. How many people actually completed registration on the site. So it's about 2,000 people in the last 3 years have completed registration. Some people started and then they stop. Some people start, but then they get redirected because of how they answer the question. And that's intentional. We added some logic to the registration process, where if someone says that there's a warrant out for their arrest, they have an active warrant, they're actively on probation still, or they're on community control. And the last one is it's been less than a year since the last case took place. Those people get redirected because more than likely they're not eligible right then, but we provide other service options when we redirect them from the registration part of the Opportunity Port site. For those who finished registration, about 1,000 of them were eligible. And so between the two service providers, Drug Enforcement Policy Center and Legal Aid Society, or Legal Aid of Southeast and Central Ohio, we've been able to complete over 1,000, or not over, we've been able to help over 1,000 users, but that doesn't necessarily equate to 1,000 applications. It's actually more than 1,000 applications. Because if you recall, one person can have multiple applications across all these jurisdictions. For those users who were not eligible at time of service, it's not that they weren't eligible, period. It's just that at time of service, they weren't eligible. That might mean that there was an outstanding fine, or they still owed restitution, or maybe we didn't know that there was a warrant. They didn't know there was a warrant. We found out there was a warrant during a review of their cases, and we're able to provide legal insight into their criminal record and education as to what to do next. So even though we have, a list of people who were not eligible, those individuals still had a touch point with legal help, with a staff attorney who explained to them on the phone, hey, this is what's up. This is what you need to do. Come back to me when this has been resolved. Or, hey, reach back out in a year. And we've had people do that. We had people sign up in the first year of Opportunity Port that have reached back out to say, hey, you told me to call back and I've called back. So being able to be a fixture that provide services at any point in time during the work week. You don't have to wait for a brick and mortar clinic to show up, or, go somewhere on a Saturday or go somewhere during the workday. We are here all the time. You sign up over the website, you send an email, we're going to get back to you. And so I still count the individuals who are not eligible as successful outcomes, because at the end of the day, it's about access to legal help and giving people information about themselves, about their criminal record, that can be very empowering, even if it's not the best news. So we've been able to assist. This map shows where users of Opportunity Port live. So we are pretty much all across the state. These are zones like zip codes. And Obviously, we get a lot of applicants from the more populated areas of Montgomery County, Franklin County, Hamilton County, Cuyahoga, and Summit, but we're also in a lot of rural areas too, and we do that through radio ads. Most of the people in those areas will say that their referral source was radio ads. And we use radio ads. We go through the Ohio Association of Broadcasters to have these ads out periodically throughout the year. Now, it's not just about applications, as I mentioned, Moritz College of Law has completed on its own about over 1,100 applications. So this doesn't include applications completed by the other service provider. And this is a review of statewide services. We have to go through a lot of cases, or our staff attorneys go through a lot of cases. So if you'll recall, we've assisted about 1,000 people, but each person has about six cases on five or six cases on average. That's a lot of cases to review. And we've touched a lot of jurisdictions. So 66 of the 88 common pleas courts that handle felony matters, 125 of 164 of the municipal and county courts, which handle municipal or misdemeanor matters. And then mayor's courts, which typically handle traffic matters. Luckily, we haven't had to deal with as many of those because they tend to be a lot smaller and a lot harder to get hold of. But we've touched a lot of courts through this work. And in doing so, we've also been able to engage with the courts to say, hey, like your form's not super accessible. Could you maybe put it online? Or this information is outdated on your website. So not only is it about serving individuals, but it's also about being part of the larger reentry community or the court and the court systems to make sure that these state laws are being administered as consistently as possible, especially for individuals who, if you have matters in multiple counties, it would be nice to know that every county is going to treat them the same. But sometimes that doesn't end up being the case. So we try to do our best to make sure that the individuals that we serve are going to have a consistent experience. However, we can't guarantee it because at the end of the day, the courts are the courts and what they say goes. But we do our best to educate them and engage in dialogue if we see that maybe something's not consistent with maybe another court and with what another court's doing. Okay, so I'm going to do my best to explain the difference between sealing and expungement, but remember, I'm not an attorney. So typically a staff attorney will go over these slides, but I like to think of sealing as putting your record in a lock, in a safe. And then expungement is putting that safe in a sinkhole where no one can get to it. Now, that's the ideal scenario, that no one can get to an expunged case, but there actually are exceptions that expunged matters can be recalled or reviewed, by law enforcement if you are applying for a law enforcement related position or you're trying to get a job in law enforcement. And all copies of what are called orders. Basically, when you go to a hearing after you apply for sealing or expungement and your application is granted, you get an order, and you get an order per case that is being sealed or expunged. And that is kind of like a golden ticket. Like you need to keep a copy of that, because even though copies of orders are maintained centrally at the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, which is the state repository for records, is not going to then distribute that to any and all background check companies. So it's really on you that if you apply for a job at, say, Wendy's headquarters or Chase customer service or any type of call center, and they run a background check, they're going to use a private company to do that background check. They're not going to go to the Bureau of Criminal Investigation if it's not a job that requires a state background check. And those background check companies might have outdated information, because think of it as like playing telephone. They're getting their information from a different company that's collected that information from a different company that got that information directly from the court. So it takes a while for their systems to get updated and for them to get correct information. And the only way that you can say, hey, this is incorrect and fix it is if you can supply a copy of the order to seal or expunge that matter. So it's really important to keep a copy of the orders if the court grants your application to seal or expunge cases. I mentioned the application process, but I'll go over it. This is the application process from through from filing and then through the court. So Opportunity Port helps complete applications, and for the Franklin County service model, we also file the application. But once the application is filed, I'll mention that some courts require their own form, but others just use like a generic form, but that's not important. Let's just say like you have the form and you file it. The prosecutor's office also gets to review your application. And sometimes the client has to serve the prosecutor separately from the court, which is just another hurdle to get over, where not only do you have to file at the court, but you might have to share a copy of that with the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor reviews it, and they have a 30-day window to file an objection. Basically, an objection that could say something like, hey, we think that this person needs to prove rehabilitation. We don't necessarily have a legal objection, like they are legally eligible, but we think that they need to prove rehabilitation considering the number of offenses, type of offenses, or the fact that there was an offense within like the last 5 years or something. Basically, prosecutors are kind of like giving some advice to the judge, but they aren't making the decision, but they're just giving information to the judge to weigh as part of the hearing, or to take into consideration as part of the hearing. And so when a hearing is set, and I mentioned that all hearings are set between 45 and 90 days of filing, applicants have to appear in front of the judge, and the judge is doing a balancing test, where they're weighing the interests of the applicants, the interest of the applicant having the record sealed or expunged versus legitimate government interests or needs to maintain the records, meaning keep them public record, and accessible by the public. The big thing is the applicant rehabilitated to the satisfaction of the court? And that could be anything from like, hey, you have outstanding fines, court costs maybe, and that could be indication that you're not rehabilitated to the satisfaction of the court. It can run the gambit, but that's the main balancing test. Like, do your interests in having these things removed from public record outweigh the interest of the public having access to those records? And again, only the judge makes that decision. So at the end of the day, the judge does have final discretion to grant or deny, or even ask you to withdraw your application if maybe there's something that isn't eligible on the application, but will be eligible in the future. So sometimes they'll even say, how about we withdraw it and you can come back in like 6 months, for instance. There is some interesting stuff going on when it comes to sealed or expunged records and professional licensing. I mentioned earlier that if you're just going and applying for a job at a call center that is not like a state agency, it's unlikely that you will need to get a license to work there, or that you would need a state background check to work for that company. There are some jobs, though, that require professional licenses, such as nurses, or working in childcare centers or elderly care centers, or healthcare generally, sometimes even security-related employment. So I did mention earlier that expunged cases can be seen if you're applying for a law enforcement specific job. And if you're applying for an education-related job, sometimes that board, the licensing board for education, can also see cases that are expunged, but I'm not sure in which scenarios. I'm just reading from the slide that the staff attorney prepared. So if you have any specific questions about professional licensing and sealing and expungement, you can reach out to me. But in general, there are disqualifying criminal offenses depending on what you're trying to get a professional license for. And all of those licensing authorities, so like the board of nursing, or a medical, I'm just kind of naming some, but I think of the board of nursing first and foremost, because we were just looking at something about them recently. The board of nursing, for instance, has a list on their website. And really it's like a PDF that you download, and then you can see this list of offenses that would potentially disqualify you from being able to apply for a license to be a nurse. So we've had individuals come to us to say, I'm in nursing school, and apparently I won't be able to get a job or be able to sit for an exam and then apply for a license if I have this criminal background. Can you help me? And the answer is That depends on an individual's specific circumstances. So I can't say in XYZ case, yes, you can get a license. In this case, you can't. It really comes down to having a staff attorney or someone who is an expert in these types of matters to look at your matter and decide the best course of action. So I'm going to leave it there for professional licensing. There are wait times and there are costs associated with filing applications to seal a conviction or a dismissal. So, and then I'll go over expungement of conviction or expungement of dismissal. But for sealing convictions, depending on the degree or depending on the degree of the offense, there's a different wait period. So you'll see third-degree felony, you have to wait 3 years after final discharge. And a final discharge means when all probation or community control is completed and all fines and restitution are paid. So felony, the third degree, 3 years after final discharge. Fourth or fifth degree felony, 1 year after final discharge. Misdemeanor or minor misdemeanor, and this is for conviction, 1 year after final discharge or 6 months after final discharge for a minor misdemeanor. Dismissal of any offense, you can apply anytime after the finding of not guilty or dismissal, and there's no cost. Everything else you have to pay up to $100, and that breaks down to $50 for a filing fee and $50 for a local court fee, which the court will call court costs a lot of the time. So up to $100 for an application at time of filing. And that means that it doesn't matter how many applications you have to fill out. If you're there with 10 applications in that one instance to file, it should only cost you $50. Now, if you have 10 applications across 10 different courts, that's likely going to be $50 times multiplied by 10 courts. So you can see how it can be costly depending on where someone has cases, how many courts someone might have cases, but it shouldn't matter how many cases at a single court. It should only be $50 if it's a conviction. If it's a dismissal, you shouldn't have to pay when you file. For expungement, think of it as the wait times for sealing a conviction and then add 10. So for felony of the third degree, it's 13 years because to seal a conviction, it was 3 years, right? So felony of the third degree, 13 years after final discharge. Fourth and fifth degree felony, 11 years because it was 1 year to seal. It's 11 years to expunge. Misdemeanor, minor misdemeanor, 1 year and 6 months. This is where it changes. For misdemeanor and minor misdemeanor, you only have to wait 1 year after final discharge or 6 months after final discharge. And that's no different from sealing. So when we have someone who's eligible for that has a misdemeanor or a minor misdemeanor, we just apply for expungement because most misdemeanors are eligible for expungement at the same time as they would be eligible to seal. There is an exception I'm not going to get into, but yeah. So, and the cost to expunge and seal is the same. And you can have, this is how it should be, but it is different at certain courts. You could have an application that lists all of your all of these cases that are eligible to expunge, and an application for all of the cases that are eligible to seal. And when you go to the same court and you file those two applications, it should only be $50. So it's not $50 depending on whether you're sealing or expunging. It's $50 no matter what. It could be everything on one application, separate applications, as long as it's one time of filing, it should be $50. Or they could also charge an additional $50 for that court cost, which is called a local court fee in Ohio in Ohio Revised Code. But that is court cost. Ineligible offenses, it's easier to talk about what's not eligible versus what is eligible, but all of the things that you would expect to not be eligible. I won't go over the list because you'll probably just get this PowerPoint after the fact anyways. So, and you can find this information pretty readily if you Google it. But first or second degree felonies are not eligible. 3 or more third degree felonies. Traffic convictions, but there are exceptions. Felony offenses of violence that are not sexually oriented offenses. Sexually oriented offenses when the applicant is subject to the requirements of the sex offender registry, basically. Or if someone's required to register as a sex offender. Offenses in which the victim of the offense was less than 13 years old. It does not apply to non-supportive defendants. So if you didn't pay child support, that does not count. Domestic violence convictions. So let me go back. Non-payment of child support, it does not count as something that is ineligible. So like that is something that could be sealed or expunged, but don't take my word for it. Again, I'm not a lawyer. You'll have to talk to a staff attorney. Another type of offense that's ineligible is domestic violence convictions, violating protection order convictions. And if you have a pending case, even if it's a traffic ticket, you can't get anything sealed or expunged while that case is active. So that has to be dealt with and done before you can do anything with any of your cases. So to summarize, Opportunity Port provides free, it's free, sealing and expungement application assistance remotely. And that includes, finding all of your cases, determining their eligibility, and even providing information about what to do if something isn't eligible or is not yet eligible. Our service models and wait times for filing vary. Oh, sorry. Our service models and our service times vary depending on where you live. If you live in Franklin County, we get to you quicker than if you live in the rest of the state, because we have a much longer list of individuals seeking help in the other 87 counties than we do for the staff attorney dedicated to just Franklin County. All applications have to be filed with the court at which you have the cases that are eligible. And sealing and expungement applications require a hearing in front of a judge. So those are kind of like the takeaways for sealing and expungement and services that we offer through this program. This QR code is to the Opportunity Port site. So if you want to, take a look at it. And then my contact information is here on the left. You can email me, and then I can also drop this in the chat as well. But I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing in case, people have questions, and thank you again for letting me talk to you about Opportunity Port. It's really great being able to serve everyone, or, anyone in the state of Ohio, instead of just being limited to residents of Franklin County, because I feel like we're making a really, really big impact that's not just helping individuals, but also helping practitioners in the justice system, in the court system, and who provide social services understand the importance of sealing and expungement, and what's available to those who might be eligible.
Hannah, thank you. That was so much information. My gosh. So for our audience, if you have questions, please start putting them into the chat now. And I will take Hannah up on her offer to add her email to the chat, just so folks have a moment to capture it. But as I was listening, I was wondering, is Ohio ahead of the curve on this? Are there similar offerings in other states? Are you aware?
Each state has its own laws for sealing and expungement, and each state refers to sealing and expungement differently. And so I would say that we're not the worst state when it comes to like in terms of what is eligible to be sealed or expunged, but there's more that we could be doing for sure.
Yeah. What about programs that help folks access this in a bit more like streamlined way?
I can't speak to how special Opportunity Port is across all of the other states, but I can say that within Ohio, it's, it was even pointed out in the chat, there are lots of places that offer sealing and expungement assistance. Think, LAWO, Legal Aid of Western Ohio, Legal Works up in Cleveland. There are clinics at law schools, Ohio Justice and Policy Center. I could go on, right? All of the legal aids are going to have second chance or reentry as, departments or initiatives that might be consistently offered as like a program within their organization, or maybe it's a one-off event that they have every quarter. And there are a lot of places that provide opportunities to attorneys to give pro bono assistance. And we were just talking about this today, that this area of law, we have the two staff attorneys that work in this area of law. they're experts at this point. They look at
Mhm.
things day in and day out. They only, we do one thing really, really well. And it can be more complicated than learning about this in an afternoon as a pro bono attorney to then help at a clinic. And so in terms of the quality of service that we can offer and the breadth, like the scope of where we offer services, I think that differentiates us. And then our service model being remote based, you could say that if you want a face-to-face service, that's not going to be us. But if you're looking for something that can fit into your everyday,
Mhm.
and not disrupt your life, then yeah, I would say that we are the only virtual only clinic, I would say, in the state of Ohio that offers services for free, no matter what you make. So
Mhm.
we are reaching individuals who don't qualify for legal aid because they make 350% of the federal poverty limit. I live in a household where I'm barely above 300%, so I wouldn't qualify for legal help if I needed it, but I also can't afford an attorney for that
Mhm.
legal help. So while our scope of services is very small, we only do sealing and expungement applications, the number of individuals we could help is quite large because it's the whole state of
Right.
Ohio. It's anyone justice impacted who might have criminal records in the state of
Mhm.
Ohio that could be eligible for sealing or expungement.
Yeah, and I think expanding that access is incredibly important because regardless of the cost, I think there's a certain like intimidation factor in approaching the courts for things like this, where folks don't know where to start. It's just a hard ball for them to get rolling.
Mhm.
Um, and I have to imagine that programs like Opportunity Port or some of the ones offered by legal aid has increased the volume or frequency of applications that the courts are seeing. Do you have any sense of the reception from the courts about programs like this? Are they happy? Are they getting
I
higher
think
quality applications?
so. I can't. I have not interviewed all the courts, but I can say from an anecdote I heard for Cuyahoga County that there was a period of time where well-meaning community group was helping people apply for sealing because expungement wasn't a thing for a lot of offenses at the time. And a lot of those applicants were not eligible. So yes, we do produce quality applications. I would say that of the 700 or so that our like we as a service provider have submitted, only 8 have been denied.
Okay,
Okay.
it's a pretty high rate.
Well, that's for just Franklin County is what I'm talking about. For
Okay.
just Franklin County, which is actually more around like 500, only like 11 or so have been denied of applicants. So yeah, we do produce higher quality applications, and I do think that courts appreciate that because it all translates to efficiency for them. They don't want a docket filled up with individuals that they have to deliver bad news to. No one wants that. I don't want to put people in front of them day in and day out who are going to get bad news.
Right.
So, so yeah, what was the other part of your question or
Oh,
comment?
that was it. Just about feedback from the courts on how this process impacts their day to day.
Mhm.
But we do have a question from a C. Gibson in the chat.
Sure.
And they were asking, before a client applies for the Opportunity Port program, are they able to talk to an attorney to make sure they qualify? And I think
No.
that's where we go back to that survey, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do not, the staff attorney, I'm like the gatekeeper. Staff attorneys don't talk to anyone unless they've completed a survey and they wait in line,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But at time of registration, if I notice that someone lives in an area where and also we collect information about household size and income. So we're able to sort of calculate a rough federal poverty percentage or level. If I think that they would be eligible and could be served quicker, I give that option. It's like,
Mhm.
hey, it's going to take 2 to 4 months for us to get to you. We are free and we will get to you. But Legal Works has community clinics multiple days a week consistently. Would you like to work with them instead? And some people take us up on that offer, and some people are like, I have to go somewhere. Absolutely not. I will wait for you to call me in 2 months. And so, so that's, it just depends on how quickly someone wants to get the ball rolling. Now, I do tell people like, you can go to Legal Works, but it's still going to be 45 to 90 days of filing. So then you still have to file that paperwork, and then you still have to wait for the court to set their hearing for you. So it's not immediate. Even if you get more immediate assistance, the process is still going to take time. And to get the benefits of it, for some people, they might have to play whack-a-mole a little bit when background checks come back, depending on where they're applying for jobs. So that's why I mentioned earlier in the presentation, when you get orders to seal or expunge a case, keep track of those orders. Like that should be in a fireproof safe or somewhere, like with your birth certificate, social security stuff, like whatever, like that needs to be something that you do not lose, so that you can bring them up to say, hey, this should not be on my record anymore. Yeah.
Okay. So do you see offerings like Opportunity Port expanding to other sort of administrative processes within the courts? And off the top of my head, I can't, like, I keep coming back to the Certificate of Qualification for Housing, the CQEs, but do you see ways to help like streamline access to the court system for folks through platforms like this?
I mean, Ohio Legal Help is trying to launch different pilots that streamline access to different types of court processes, like applying for protection order, for instance. So they launched a pilot up in Cuyahoga County recently. There's nothing quite like Opportunity Port that is launching that does all the things. We have talked about what it would be like to help someone also with a CQE if they're not eligible for sealing or expungement, or helping with a CQH, but it really just comes down to time of staff attorneys and funding, unfortunately. So right now we have the ability to do one thing really, really well. We'd rather do that than spread ourselves thin. So we try to offer as much information about those other things as possible, whether it be, hey, I think you'd be an expedited pardon, you'd be a great candidate for the expedited pardon project. Here's information about that. And fortunately, one of the staff attorneys that works on Opportunity Port also works on the expedited pardon project. So there's actually a lot of overlap of individuals who are in the expedited pardon project, but have cases that could be expunged in the meantime. And then people who are not eligible for sealing or expungement that we refer to the expedited pardon project. So there's a lot of partnerships that we've created to make sure that there is a warm handoff. But in terms of like where Opportunity Port is going to go next, right now, we are just the sealing and expungement experts, and that's kind of our bread and butter at the moment.
Yeah. Well, and you said a good trigger word for me, which was partnerships. So a lot of our audience today are various partners in the community, service providers that are working with justice involved folks in any number of capacities. So for agencies or individuals like that, do you have any feedback on what they should be doing to get this information out to clients? Any details or any things that any consistency in messaging that folks should be hearing like right off the bat? Maybe that, expungement isn't the cure-all that some folks may think that it is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that anyone who is not an attorney should be talking about sealing, should be trying to pre-screen someone for eligibility. If someone has a criminal record, or if they say, I can't get housing because of my background check, no one will rent to me, I can't get a job. If they're not offering that they have a criminal record, or you haven't already screened them that they have one, ask the question, like, do you have a criminal record? And if you do, maybe you're eligible for sealing or expungement. So really just telling them what sealing and expungement is the first step, because a lot of people just don't know it's a thing. We have people coming to clinics or coming to us who didn't know about sealing or expungement, and they were eligible 10 years ago, and they have been suffering the consequences of their record for 10 years, like needlessly. And so I really just letting people know it's an option is the first thing. Just telling them what it is. Explaining to them, if you're eligible, sealing is like putting your record in a safe and locking it away, so no one can see it except for people who have the combination to the safe. And then expungement is like taking that safe and throwing it in a sinkhole. No one's going to have access to it. You don't need to explain like, well, there are exceptions. You don't need to know that. You're not an attorney. but just giving them an idea of this being a possibility for them, or that it's actually a remedy available under Ohio law, that's the first step, and then
Mm-hmm.
some of our partnerships are a bit more like this, where they have participants in a program, and when they sit that person down to do intake for their program and they evaluate, do you have a criminal record? Looks like you do. Okay. Well, let's just go hop over to Opportunity Port. I'm going to fill this out for you. We're going to sit here. We're going to do this together. Because at
Mm-hmm.
that point, once they're in our list, I'm going to reach out to them, and I have record that they need help. And so we're going to reach out to them. We're going to get to them. And if they don't respond, they don't respond. But more often than not, when we have a social service organization say to them, I can't help you with this, but it will be helpful for you to work with this organization. And it's free, and you don't have to go anywhere except to the court ultimately if you're eligible. Let's sit here and let's do this it's going to take 5 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
just giving them access to the tools to do it. So maybe they don't want to use their phone to do it, or they'll say they'll do it and then they don't do it. I mean, I don't do things that I'm supposed to do in a timely manner. I can only imagine that if justice involved people are dealing with all of the other craziness of their lives, will neglect to do things that might help them in the long term, but they're really focused on the now. So when you can have them in a room, have the conversation, and provide that service to them to get them in the queue.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, that sounds like a great first step, especially for somebody who, like you said, may have been, experiencing these barriers for so long without ever pursuing it. Another 2 months, it would be great if it were faster, but in the grand scheme of things,
Right.
we can do
Yeah.
that.
And if there's anyone on this webinar that you work for a social service organization, you think your team would benefit from just learning more about this so that you can speak more intelligibly about it, then I can do a training, basically a more
Oh,
in-depth training with a whole team. And I've done that before. Or library systems that have resource specialists. Like there are different ways that I can connect with you in order to give you the tools and information you need to explain this to someone that would be needing your service, or
yeah,
needing to access the service.
that's fantastic. And I have a feeling that folks are going to be taking you up on that very generous offer. And here they come into our
Yeah,
chat, folks who would
I
love
know.
follow-up training.
Mhm.
So that's
Absolutely.
fantastic.
The Drug Enforcement Policy Center has a few things on our website about, opportunity port, reentry, record relief. The Ohio Sentencing Commission has a really helpful comprehensive guide of all the different rights restoration options that are available under Ohio law. Even though Opportunity Port only, and I'm talking specifically to that social service kind of sector or organizations,
Mhm.
you know, there are a lot of resources out there, I know, and it's like, well, where do you start? And so that's also something that we won't just talk about Opportunity Port. I can also talk about, okay, what other players are in this space, and what
Mhm.
handouts are there that you can use for your efficacy's sake, better understand record relief, so that you can assist people accordingly. Now,
Right.
what I will say is, again, if you are a social worker, you should not be helping someone determine their eligibility for sealing or expungement. Your job is getting them in the queue to receive that assistance by a legal professional. So,
Yeah.
because I want it to be easier for social workers to help someone, and it's not helpful to tell social workers suddenly you need to be a lawyer. You're not a lawyer. You don't need to do that. Your job is connecting someone with a resource that's going to help them, and it's going to be a quality program. And so
Mhm.
that's where I can be like, okay, if it's this, then you do this. If this, if this. But Opportunity Port, once we get to someone, we're able to then take kind of the reins in terms of, okay, you're not eligible for this, but you are eligible for this. Here's this. Or
Right.
you're eligible for this. Here's this. So think of Opportunity Port not just as kind of the gateway to sealing and expungement, but also a way to connect someone with legal help to better understand their record and what their options are, just writ large.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and while I do a final call for any questions to go into the chat, that is such a huge part of working in reentry, is knowing who to call when, which expert or which organization can I bring to the table, to meet this need at this moment. And that is a big deal for those of us that do this work. We have a question from Pamela wanting to know if Opportunity Port is listed in Relink. Are you
I don't
familiar?
believe so. I don't believe that we are. I'm not sure. I don't think so currently.
So Relink is a resource site that our incarcerated population in Ohio actually has access to on their tablets.
Okay.
And they can search by both location and by topic. And you guys might find a place for you to be listed under, like Pamela suggested, under reentry services to help folks become aware of that availability. So it might be something to follow up on. Thanks, Pamela.
Yeah, I know there was a question about can you handle matters while you're currently incarcerated? And when you're currently incarcerated, that's considered an active or pending matter. So you can't deal with any of your offenses while you are incarcerated. I know I can answer that question.
Okay.
You have to wait until your case is finally discharged. So you have to have been released and finished any post incarceration
Community supervision.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
yeah.
Like supervision. You have to be released from that. And then at that point, there might be other cases that you can apply for. But let's say you committed an offense 10 years ago, but then you're currently incarcerated and then you get out. The 10 years ago offenses would then be eligible once you're out and you are released from supervision. But the thing for which you were incarcerated, that the clock doesn't start until final discharge. So then for that, you might have to wait 3 years or the 10 years.
Got it. Always a good thing to have the professional look at and check out.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Hannah, I want to thank you for your time today. I think this was a great session for us to wrap on and for our audience who was attentive and came to us with important questions. And so thanks everyone for joining. It looks like we exhausted the questions in the chat. So again, I want to thank Ms. Miller for sharing her time and expertise. I hope you folks plan on participating in one of the in-person offerings around the state tomorrow. I will be in Cincinnati myself, so if you see me there, please come up and say hello. And I want to encourage all of you to enjoy the rest of your day and tomorrow's offerings. And wish everybody a good evening. I also want to thank the 4-7 who was our virtual host today. And we have Jill online who got us all here together in this space. And we really appreciate what they do. So thanks, everyone.